Kevin Harvick is one of the most accomplished drivers of this century in NASCAR, compiling 60 wins and a championship through his 2-decade career. From being thrown into the deep end after the most tragic and unforeseen circumstances imaginable, he exceeded expectations and carved his own unique path to an eventual Hall of Fame induction. He had his growing pains and raw emotional lapses early, but continued to grind away and find himself coming through on the biggest stages with all-time photo finishes that will forever be enshrined in NASCAR lore. But you know what they say, the great ones always have a specialty they can lean on, a certain trait or intangible that separates them from the rest of the crowd. One of, if not the most reliable for Harvick, was out in the desert at Phoenix Raceway. He amassed 9 wins and 42 starts, but unlike other chapters in this series, his path to dominance at this track was unorthodox. Harvick didn't set the world on fire at Phoenix for quite a while. He was never brought up in the conversation as a threat to win for the first several attempts he made. In his first 6 starts, he had 1 top 5, with no better finish than 17th otherwise. But he eventually found his footing as he embarked on the prime of his career and began to hit his stride on his way to becoming one of the very best the Cup Series had to offer. Phoenix is a one-of-a-kind racetrack with a unique layout, sitting 1 mile in length with 3 different corners of banking and entry. It was constructed in 1964, but NASCAR didn't join the party till 1988. It's been through a reconfiguration, going from a flat chicane on the backstretch to a banked dogleg with the removal of all the grass to allow for multi-wide racing well off the racing groove. It now hosts the championship finale for the time being in all major series and has always served as a pivotal race in the championship picture, being so close to the end of the season. It used to have 1 date a year but expanded to 2 in 2006. It now has luxurious facilities and state-of-the-art amenities with brand new grandstands to top it all off. What makes Harvick's reign here more impressive is he succeeded on both layouts. It got to a point where you had to go through him to win here, which is right on par with the other iterations of track dominance. But let's of course start where it all began, with a desert sweep in 2006. This was Harvick's breakout season in Cup. Having won just 5 total races up to this point, he matched that in 2006 alone with 2 of those wins right here. In the spring race, he started a pedestrian 15th and was quiet in the early stages. The TV broadcast didn't even mention him in the first third of the race, and it was there he finally got some screen time and the team told him he was running just as fast as the leader. He had been nestled in the back half of the top 10 and methodically working his way forward, but the car was quote stupid tight at the time. With each pit stop, the GM Goodwrench crew continued to make air pressure adjustments and try to get the car to roll through the center of the corners better. He went from the top 10 to the top 5 and suddenly became a player as the race went on. He started putting on a display of a line he was perfecting that really added as to why this track became such a favorite of his, going well below the apron in the turns and making it stick. It became a signature move of his, and he made the most of it. The best cars of the night were Greg Biffle and Mark Martin, with Tony Stewart also in the mix. As Harvick joined them, he still needed a bit more help as the car was going back and forth between tight and loose. On the final restart with 80 to go, Biffle and Stewart drove off and left the field. With this being a long green flag run to end the race, fuel strategy would come into play. At one point, Harvick's team thought he might be a lap short, but with all the cautions beforehand gave him a chance to save. However, he was about 4 seconds back from the lead. As the laps wound down towards 20 to go, suddenly Harvick found a 5th gear and blazed his way toward the 2 leaders. He briefly battled Tony for second, but eventually powered by, and then set his sights on Biffle. With it being this close to the finish, it looked like a possible epic battle for the win would take shape. That would not be the case. Harvick blew by on the inside with 10 to go, and that was that. A lot of the field had to back off to conserve fuel, and some didn't even make it, including Mark and Biffle. But Kevin had more than enough in the tank and cruised to his first victory in the desert. When I said that he was rather nondescript here before, these were Harvick's first laps led in a Cup car at Phoenix. I think he picked a good time, and having won the Busch race the night before, it was a weekend sweep on the way to what would be a dream season in the making. When they returned in the fall, it would go the opposite way for the 29 team. They came in on the fringes of the championship chase, but rest assured they did about everything they could to get back in it. Harvick would start outside pole and hound Jeff Gordon for the first handful of laps until he finally pried it away from him and took full command. He drove out to a comfortable 2.5 second lead and appeared to have the dominant car of the race. But on lap 133, he fell victim to too much lap traffic and allowed the fast-closing Jimmy Johnson to overtake him. Around 30 laps later, Kevin would retake the top spot right back and once again have a firm grip on the action. No one else seemed to have much for him. The race was largely ran under green flag for long segments with little interruption, but in the last 100 laps or so, a flurry of yellows broke out, killing the rapid momentum of the race. And to make things interesting, it was reported with around 100 to go that Harvick was dealing with battery problems. The voltage was dwindling down towards 11 volts, which would force him to turn off things like the brake fans and his AC intake. Luckily, with not a whole lot of racing left, they felt like it could make it to the end without much issue. But the wrecks kept piling up and created more and more drama. On the last pit stops of the race, another curveball got thrown with Mark Martin taking 2 tires and Johnson edging the 29 out on pit road. Johnson tried to work around the 6 but was too conservative and Kevin took advantage. He pounced into second and was on the verge of reclaiming the lead until a spin with less than 10 to go prompted a red flag. This was possible disaster given Harvick's battery situation, and a real question came into play about if his car would refire. By the rule book, NASCAR granted him a free push start by a safety truck as the red flag wasn't of his own doing and it turned out to be his saving grace. He was able to hold off one last fierce charge from the eventual champ Johnson and finish off the sweep of 2006. Kevin said in victory lane he knew he had it won and wasn't letting anything get by him. He led a whopping 252 laps and suddenly became known as a major factor at Phoenix Raceway for years to come. But here's where the story gets more puzzling. From this point, Harvick would go another 6 years without seeing victory lane at Phoenix again in a Cup car. And not just that, but he was unable to replicate the magic of that 2006 season, winning just one race in the next 3 years combined, albeit that win was the Daytona 500 in breathtaking fashion. Whatever the variables were, things weren't all sunshine and rainbows at RCR. Forget winning at Phoenix again, he needed to get his swagger back. Kevin was on the verge of becoming just another guy in the field. He would start to regain some taste of victory again in 2010, and it seemed like things were getting back on track. And at long last, it would finally be towards the end of the 2012 season when he took the checkered flag again in the desert. But this would go down as Harvick's most forgotten win of his career, let alone one of the most in the series history in that category. This was also in the reconfiguration era of this track. The backstretch chicane was banked and there was no more grass below it, just nothing but pavement down to the inside wall to create more lanes and chaos. Kevin started a mundane 19th and was once again quiet in the early going. After not making any ground, the team elected to go with 2 tires under a caution just past lap 50 to go for track position and see what the car was capable of towards the front. It didn't really work. Kevin was having too much trouble turning it, and the spring rubber they put in didn't do enough as he stabilized around 10th. But at the next pit stop about 100 laps later under yellow, he went with 2 lefts and vaulted into the top 5. This time he maintained that track position and was as high as 3rd. Progress was being made, but he still wasn't quite a winning car. He made a daring 3-wide move with less than 70 to go and got really racy with Denny Hamlin and Brad Keselowski, who was going for the championship, but couldn't keep position over them and went back to 5th. Kyle Busch was far and away the best car and appeared to be running away with it uncontested. But another case of late race cautions would change everything. Harvick restarted 4th with 28 to go and soon after got by Casey Kane for 2nd. With less than 20 to go, he was beginning to close on the dominant Busch, but a caution with 13 to go threw everything out the window. Busch elected to restart on the inside lane, and that would be his undoing. Harvick powered around him on the outside and appeared to be pulling away and had it in the bag. But Clint Bowyer making contact with Jeff Gordon led to an infamous tangle a few laps later and rocked the boat. The 29 guys thought they had got the white flag, which would deem the race over, but they were within 100 yards of taking it. Crew Chief Gil Martin and Richard Childress vehemently opposed and pleaded their case, but it was clear on video. Turns out, the reason they were so amped up was Harvick was borderline on making it on fuel, under the red flag once again as cleanup took place from that altercation between the 15 and 24. But there was no excessive drama and Kevin once again outdrove Kyle on the final restart and dodged a fluid-leaking 10 car of Danica Patrick to claim his first win in 44 races and 3rd at Phoenix. The closer finished the job once again. It had been announced that week that the following year would be his last with RCR, so this was about as well of a conclusion you could ask for after a tumultuous week in the headlines. But there was still business to take care of in 2013. In Harvick's lame duck season that next November, he started a solid 9th and marched right up to the front. He took the lead from Jeff Gordon on that outside lane on a restart just past 50 laps and gained control with what looked like the strongest car in the field. He set the pace till the next caution but had to take 4 tires since they only took 2 on the first stop. Kevin was saying the car was free for most of the early going, but it sure didn't look like it. His car looked comfortable out front and it was smooth sailing to that point. Other drivers went with 2 tires on that latest stop, which set him back just outside the top 5, but he was able to work his way back to 2nd. A multi-car pileup at lap 145 would change the complexion of the race, however, and a true split strategy would break out all throughout the field with cautions coming at erratic moments in between the fuel window. Kevin would really be shuffled back near 20th, and we were truly about to find out how good his car was. He needed to be patient and keep the fenders on it, and eventually he would work his way through the hornet's nest. The more cautions that fell, the more mixed up the pit strategy got, but the 29 guys stayed the course and set themselves up for the best position they could be in at the end. With the last green flag stop taking place with around 70 to go, Kevin could stay out longer than most of the leaders and retook first until he finally had to come in one last time. But there was one problem. A miscalculation of their fuel window led to Kevin suddenly running out of gas in the lead with 45 to go, and he had to coast into pit road, hoping not to lose too much time. Fortunately, the car refired and he was able to get back up to speed no problem, but it remained to be seen what the damage was when the field cycled around when all the cars made their last stop. A debris caution with 31 to go allowed the field to reset, and Kevin had only fallen to fourth. Easily within striking distance and given a second life, he nailed the restart and was in position. He moved into second past Casey Kane with 18 to go, but it was looking like Carl Edwards had built too big of a lead for him to chase down. But sometimes your track is just your track. Carl's team made a massive mistake on their last stop, not getting the car completely full of fuel, and he was notified that they would be a lap and a half short. Sometimes these calculations are a little off, and drivers can try to stave enough to make it up, but turns out they were exactly right. On the backstretch, the 99 sputtered and Kevin was able to zoom on by and collected win number 4 in the Valley of the Sun. This was more on the lucky side, but when you've got a knack for a track, sometimes the bounces will go your way. It wasn't the cleanest departure from RCR for Harvick, but this was about as good of a send-off as you can ask for as he replicated Alan Kulwicki's Polish victory lap at the very place he unveiled it in his first career victory in the inaugural race in 1988. So then, Harvick makes what turned out to be the best decision of his career, jumping to the surging Stewart-Haas racing team in a newly added Ford team with crew chief Rodney Childers. The two weren't sure how well they would work together, but ended up giving it a go, and the rest is history. And what better way to start things off than when Phoenix being the second race of the season to give them a chance to showcase the potential they had. Kevin showed right off the bat he had one of the fastest cars on race weekend, winning practice but missing out on the last round of qualifying by a thousandth of a second. He started 13th, but that would be a distant memory by day's end. He made his way to 6th in 4 laps, and by the competition caution on lap 35, he was knocking on the leader's door. After a 2-tire stop, he lost a couple spots on pit road, but chased down Joey Logano on lap 74 and was back in his comfort zone, the lead. He was getting through the corners with ease, having no problems with entry or exit. By lap 100, lap traffic got heavy and allowed Dale Jr. to close, but Kevin staved off the charge. After a round of green flag stops, Kevin maintained control and led at the halfway mark by 1.5 seconds. It was clear he was the car to beat once again. After a caution at lap 166, he took 2 tires among other leaders but wanted more takeoff early in the runs to allow for a better chance to control the restarts, with guys like Logano, Dale Jr., and Keselowski threatening. The cautions drastically ramped up in the second half of the race, allowing more chances for guys to overtake the 4 car, but he drove off on every restart and no one seemed to have a move for him. Dale Jr. was within a shadow in much of the late runs, and a caution came out at the back end of the next green flag stop cycle, but Kevin was able to retake the lead with the remaining cars that hadn't pitted giving way. With about 50 to go, Kevin was told he had enough fuel to make it to the end, which was all he needed to hear, allowing him to hold nothing back and push the car as much as he needed. There were several dramatic restarts towards the end, and the case was being made for a handful of the better cars that day to steal the win from Kevin, but this is the closer we're talking about. He wasn't letting this slip. On the last restart with 9 to go, he held off a run from the 22 and did what he had all day and sealed the deal, leading 224 laps in the process. By taking the checkered flag for the 5th time, he became the all-time winningest driver at Phoenix to that point and wasted no time making his statement that he made the right decision leaving his longtime ride for a new venture. It was about to be a special chapter of Harvick's career. In the fall of that same year, the circumstances would be quite different than anything else in this video. In the new playoff format of the chase, Harvick came in 28 points below the cut line to make it to the Championship 4 finale in Homestead. With all the variables in place, it was understood from the jump that Kevin likely needed to win to advance for a shot at his first Cup Series championship. Let's just say the message was understood. He started 3rd and found himself in a tight 3-way battle for the lead with fellow counterparts for the title, Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin. He wasn't quite able to take the lead, but the first caution of the day allowed him to get new tires and make adjustments. The car was too free and needed tightening up, and the 4 team went with 2 tires. It was clear not long after that the Budweiser crew got the car dialed in, and by lap 45 he got a great run on the outside of Logano off turn 4 to assume the lead. Little did they know at the time that would be about the last time anyone else saw the lead the rest of the day. It was same song, different verse, as Harvick clearly had the car to beat once again. But the fastest car doesn't always win. It was their responsibility to avoid all the chaos and keep the fenders on it. Kevin would have the race in hand until lap 81 when on the next pit stops under caution, Dale Jr. decided to take track position with 2 tires and sent the 4 car back to second. That would last about 5 seconds. Kevin quickly regained control and disappeared once again. The broadcast was barely even talking about him for much of the action. They would go entire segments between commercials without bringing him up. When you're in the lead, that's ideal. On the next stop, Logano beat Harvick out of pit road, but the gas can couldn't detach soon enough, and he was penalized for equipment outside of the box, allowing Harvick to reassume the lead. The car was so dialed in, there were no changes being made on any of these stops. Past halfway, no one was threatening the 4 car. He even lapped Hamlin and Logano, 2 guys he was racing for the lead at the beginning. The cautions once again picked up big time in the second half, but it didn't matter. Any attempt to add to the drama of this being essentially a must-win and all the outrageous antics that normally came with the penultimate race of the season was futile. Restart after restart, Kevin promptly left the field in the dust, not even budging or opening the door for any possible slip-up. The pit crew was flawless, sending him back out in front every time. With 16 to go, the new track record for cautions in a Phoenix race was set, and this seemed to be the last heave at a total shift of the outcome, but Kevin wasn't having it. This team just had Phoenix figured out, and no one could do anything about it. He hit the NASCAR version of a walk-off homer to vault the 4 team into the final race for the championship, leading a staggering 264 laps, 40 more than he did in the spring, with a much more dramatic moment to top it off. When you look back and remember Harvick's only championship, think about this race before you think about Homestead, because it would have never happened without it. All the pressure was on this team and you would have never thought it. They weren't even flustered by the moment, thrashing the competition convincingly. This gave Kevin his 3rd win in a row in the desert, and he showed no signs of slowing down anytime soon. When he and the 4 team came back the first time as defending champions, you know they set out to prove it wasn't a one-year wonder, and they wanted to keep the momentum going by making it 4 in a row at Phoenix. On the surface, this race seemed like another ho-hum whipping of the field by Harvick. He started on pole, led over 200 laps, and clearly had the best car. But there were a lot of speed bumps and inconveniences that made it more difficult than the past few. For one, he got beat on the start by Logano and fell back a few spots, but other teams were more aggressive on their transmissions and RPMs with higher gears, and Kevin wanted to be more conservative. The composed Rodney Childers reminded him he would work his way back before long. After a couple early cautions, he came back up to second and then overtook the 22 for the lead by lap 26. So much for that slow start. Kevin would reach a milestone early on by leading his 1,000th lap at Phoenix, which seemed low given how often he spent at the front all these years. But then the fun was over and the challenges began. He had to get a piece of debris off his grill at around lap 100. He lost the lead on pit road under caution at lap 117 due to other teams gambling with 2 tires, but they should have known better. It would take a lot more than that to beat this team here. On the restart, Kevin found himself in heavy traffic, and the cars in front got stacked up, causing him to rough up Kyle Larson. But things would settle down and he would begin the march back forward, hoping his 4 tires would prevail in the long run. That's exactly what happened as he passed Brad Keselowski on lap 140 to take back command. But the obstacles weren't done yet. On the next pit stop, the team had a hard time changing tires and he lost the lead again to Logano, who took 2. Once again trying anything to dethrone this unstoppable force, but it was useless. Kevin snagged the lead back on lap 199 and once again stood his ground. It was during this run the Fox broadcast dove into what made him so dominant here by easing out of the throttle earlier than most and rotating through the corners effortlessly while jumping back into the gas earlier on corner exit. It sounds easy, but Kevin just made it seem that way. After a couple more cautions, he relayed to the team he was having to lift a lot earlier going into the corners to keep from killing the right front tire, which tells you the car was tight. And then the final challenge. On a caution with 24 to go, with the fuel window being borderline, there was a question of what the leaders would do. Rodney and Kevin both held their breath and stayed out, hoping they wouldn't get snookered and left out to dry by everyone else. Some came in, but there were enough lead lap cars that stayed out to make a cushion between him and the ones with fresh tires. And after one last caution shortly after, he had to go toe-to-toe with Jamie McMurray on the restart to seal the deal. Jamie got the edge in turn 1, but coming out of 2, Harvick got the run and kept him side by side, allowing him to power by for good. They don't call him the closer for nothing. He earned his 4th straight Phoenix win and continued the rapid takeover with Rodney Childers, and it became abundantly clear that duo was a serious problem for the rest of the series. After Mother Nature cost him a chance to sweep yet again in the fall race by cutting it short, he was out for redemption in March of 2016. But out of all of the domination and steamrolling of the competition we've been through, this edition would take the cake. There were no preliminary signs that this would be anything like a Sunday cruise of the past for Kevin. He would have to earn this one. and he knew it going into the weekend, feeling like everyone had caught up. There was also a new tire and slightly new aero package, throwing another wrench into the equation. And to really sound the alarms, Kevin wouldn't have the best qualifying effort, starting a lackluster 18th. And by virtue had to settle for a less than ideal pit stall, which Kevin reported rolling off the grid that he couldn't see the pit sign from the brightness of the sun. Safe to say Happy Harv had his work cut out for him, but we all know he wasn't going to be back there for long. He methodically worked his way forward in the opening laps, and by lap 83 moved past the pole sitter Kyle Busch for third. As they stated on the broadcast, you could start the Jaws theme music. It looked like a routine race here for Kevin to this point. He was about to take the lead shortly and he would run off and no one would see his bumper again. But that wouldn't be the case. He was still struggling with the balance of the car and adjusting the track bar up and down, trying to find the right groove. He still maintained third for much of the middle portion, but that's not good enough for this team. He still needed to get back in the throttle off the corners like he was so accustomed to, and the 4 car was still a work in progress. Finally, on a lap 169 restart, he tasted the lead for the first time on the inside of Carl Edwards, which was much later in the running than people were used to. But even with this slight consolation, he wasn't getting away like vintage Harvick. Carl was in his tire tracks, stalking him less than half a second back. He would eventually stretch it out to roughly a second, but a yellow with 87 to go changed everything. These pit stops came just outside the fuel window to make it to the end, and immediately off the jack, Kevin was told to start saving, as they were a lap short. On the race off pit road, the 19 edged him out to create another setback, but remember this image for later. Kevin would swiftly retake the lead on the restart, but at some point had to get conservative. He finally got enough of a cushion to let off the gas early, but with less than 40 to go, Dale Jr. suddenly got back in the picture after leading earlier in the day, going by the stout Edwards ride, and started eating into Harvick's lead. The race continued to run green as the laps wound down, and the fuel question was still very much part of the picture. Kevin would keep a steady 2-second lead from Jr. with under 10 laps left, and seemingly had his 8th Phoenix win in the bag. But a caution with 6 to go for Casey Kane hitting the wall would throw everything out the window. Suddenly, a victory was all in jeopardy as it was decision time on pit road. Harvick and Dale Jr.'s team would gamble and stay out looking to hang on to track position, but basically everyone from Edwards in third on back would fade them by coming into the pits and getting 2 tires. This was about the worst case scenario, because if Kevin did come down pit road, it would have been vice versa. Coming to the restart, tensions got ramped up to 100 as a sudden major threat with Edwards on new tires would be right on his bumper for an overtime finish. Kevin got the initial jump with the aid of Jr. being on his inside, but Carl would follow through and look to spoil the party. Coming to the white flag, it was clear this would be a hairy finish, knowing the second place car was faster than the first. How would it shake out? Just sit back and watch as the closer did his thing.
Dillon dropping way back, won't be a factor.
If Harvick can hold him off, I tell you, he's Superman. That's all I can say.
Well, he held him off right there through 1 and 2, but can he do it 3 and 4?
3 wide, turn 2. Everybody gets through. Next flag ends the race. There's never been a last lap pass at Phoenix.
Here he comes.
Carl.
He's under him.
He's going to move him up the racetrack.
Got him up the hill. Here he comes.
Wow, look at him slam.
That's going to be.
Too close to call.
I can't call that one.
Did you see them hitting one another?
I think Harvick got it by a fraction of an inch.
I think 1/100th of a second. What a finish.
I tell you, okay, Kevin Harvick, Superman. I'll give him that.
And you got to give Carl Edwards a lot of credit for making that thing interesting. Boy, he went for it right there.
After this win, Kevin officially put himself in NASCAR God tier. You could count on one hand how many guys could have held off the snarling 19 car, but at his own playground, it was happening. This to me is one of the more forgotten photo finishes in NASCAR. It was everything you could ask for. Both guys played fair, and it was old-fashioned beating and banging to the line, shades of Darlington 2003. 2 of the best going one-on-one, and the Cactus King prevailing. Kevin said he knew he didn't want to see the 19 behind him, and he couldn't hold the bottom in turn 4 because of all the built-up rubber laid down. He had to play defense, and that last contact slowed Carl down enough to edge him out at the line. Kevin could just do it all. I bet at this point, fans were starting to get hesitant buying tickets to this place because they had a good idea of how it was going to turn out. He might as well have bought an ownership stake in the track and put his face all over the facility. It was getting obnoxious what he was accomplishing, but guess what? We're still not quite finished. Harvick's 9th and final triumph at Phoenix would come in unorthodox fashion. It would also take place in one of his most dominant seasons of his career. He was coming off 2 wins in a row at Atlanta and Vegas, but at Vegas his team was dealt hefty penalties for violations for alterations to the car. This gave Kevin all the motivation he needed to make a statement that they were bigger than that mishap. They were still the team to beat and could win fair and square. He started 10th, and as he routinely did, slowly but surely worked his way forward. But the track was a lot slicker during the race under the sun as opposed to cloudy skies in practice, causing a loose condition with Kevin making track bar adjustments trying to find grip. Nonetheless, he finished second in the first stage and found himself firmly in contention. However, Kyle Busch was clearly the car to beat this race, and it was going to take a near perfect race car to beat him. He still lacked the speed and handling to get by, settling in second. By lap 121, he still couldn't find the grip he needed, and the team was searching for what adjustments needed to be made. On a caution late in the second stage, the car was finally getting better in turn 3 and 4, and they made an air pressure change but lost some track position on the pit stop. With some guy staying out going for the stage win, he was relegated to 7th at the end of stage 2. The 4 team would encounter a slight scare shortly after, with Rodney reporting to Kevin they may not have gotten all the lug nuts tied on the left rear. But Kevin said he didn't feel anything off and continued on. He finally took the lead for the first time with 134 to go, but it wouldn't last long. A caution 14 laps later would reshuffle the field and Kevin would have to keep working hard for it. The car kept getting better, but with a couple guys taking 2 tires, he restarted 4th. This is where the intensity cranked up and things got racy. He was in a 3-way battle with Denny Hamlin and Busch, 2 of the best cars of the day, and they all knew how valuable track position was at this stage. He and Denny would close in on rookie William Byron, who took 2 tires, and get in a breathtaking 3-wide battle for the lead, but Hamlin would prevail. Harvick would harass the 11 for a lengthy period, trying to find a way around him, but kept getting the momentum on the high side, and there wasn't much Kevin could do. All this tight racing would bring the 18 of Busch back into the picture, and the action ramped up even more with 3 of the best in the sport duking it out. They would all trade spots, and Kyle ended up riding to the top with a better car, but the war was far from over. Green flag stops would take place with less than 60 to go, and Kevin came in still needing the ideal grip to pull off the win. He was pedaling through the corners instead of being able to roll through, but the brake was about to fall his way. The pit cycle went his way after Busch stayed out a little longer and spent slightly longer on and off pit road by about 2 seconds, which would vault the 4 car ahead. Chase Elliott actually jumped everyone and came out just ahead of Harvick, and he put up quite the effort to hang on to the spot. But after a few laps, Kevin was able to pinch him up the track in turn 4 and drive by. Ryan Newman and Brad Keselowski tried an off-sequence strategy to stay out, hoping for a caution, but that never came. Newman finally surrendered with 23 to go and handed the lead back over to the closer, and he did his job. Kyle didn't have anything for him when it counted, and win number 9 was in the books.
Off turn 4, Happy Harvick gets his 40th career win and his 9th at Phoenix.
How about that, boys? That's how you rebound and just show them how it is right there.
And you best believe Kevin had quite the tangent in victory lane, giving his blunt emotions live on air.
4 days, what type of message, Kevin, does this performance?
Is what I've been mad as all get out because this team does a great job, this organization does a great job, and we've got fast race cars, and to take that away from those guys just really pissed me off last week. And yeah, I mean, this really felt more important than winning at Homestead, to race for a championship, just to drive it home for all those supporters out there and all you haters. I see you.
While this would be Kevin's final victory at Phoenix Raceway, it was far from the last of his success and emotional moments. Dating back to the fall 2013 race all the way till his last race there in the 2023 finale, he never finished outside the top 10 again. That is not a typo. 21 straight top 10 finishes. Of all the videos in this series, Harvick's stranglehold on this track was by far the most impressive. And when you factor in things like not leading his first lap there until his first win just over 5 years into his Cup career, that is just wild. He figured something out there in that 2006 range. Something clicked. That line he ran down on the apron that nobody else could master. His ability to work the throttle in the corners to perfection. Clutch moment after clutch moment, vaulting him into a championship. It was just endless. He's the all-time lap leader as of now, the all-time win leader, and that's why he's labeled the Cactus King. But before the end of this journey came one last send-off. It's fitting now that the last race on the schedule is in the desert, because that's where his stellar career would end. Although he wasn't in the championship 4, he got a proper send-off with a message from his kids, Keelan and Piper, on the warm-up laps.
Hey Dad, I'm so proud of you. Had a great career. Finish it off with World War.
4, buddy, thank you.
Good luck, Dad!
Thank you, Piper.
He finished a solid 7th that day and capped off a world-class clinic on how to run here. This was how the job was done. When an issue arose during a race, the calm demeanor of Rodney Childers would permeate through the team and they would overcome it. Sometimes luck was on their side, sometimes they just whooped the field, but they always found a way. They always had the car perfectly dialed in. If you wanted to win here, you had to go through them. Harvick's total Phoenix stats are 9 wins, 20 top 5s, 31 top 10s, and 1,722 laps led. That's not bad. Without all this success, who knows how his Hall of Fame resume would stack up. It would be quite different, I believe. This place helped shape him into the legend he is. Somebody needs to name a grandstand there after him. Well, that's it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe like your life depends on it. This has been a Platinum Paradise video.